with On Air with Tony Sweet, only on Universal Broadcasting Network.
This is Tony Sweet, and you're listening to On Air with Tony Sweet on Universal Broadcasting Network. And I'm here with Eddie Connor.
How you doing?
I'm good. And Eddie Connor, you know what?
What?
What would if I told you that few months, 6 months, maybe even a year, there was an asteroid heading towards the Earth? What would you do?
What would I do?
What would you do?
I'd call my mama.
Oh, what would you call her?
I would say, Mama, there's an asteroid heading toward Earth. We're going to move you from the double wide and move you into a house. You're going to be living fine until the earthquake, until the asteroid hits the Earth.
Well, what if I say that we have a guest on the show today that can give us some possibilities of that happening?
Ooh.
So.
Oh, my goodness. Well, Tony Taylor is our next guest, and Tony graduated from the United States Air Force Academy and earned an MS in physics. He also spent a long career navigating NASA to every single planet in the solar system. His latest book, The Darkest Side of Saturn, was inspired by watching images of the night side of Saturn from the Voyager spacecraft as they arrived for the first time at the Jet Propulsion Laboratories where he worked. Now, Tony flew 150 combat missions in an F-4C Phantom fighter during the Vietnam conflict. Now, 100 of those missions were over North Vietnam against some of the most intense anti-craft defenses in recorded history. So please welcome to On Air with Tony Street's Truth Be Told,
Tony Taylor. How you doing, Tony?
Thank you for that, Tony and Eddie. Thanks to you. I admire your North Carolina accent.
I know. I said I feel like I'm.
By the way, you tweeted the show with the question, "Are we doomed?"
Hey,
that was an ominous lead-in, and I'm wondering, this is a Friday afternoon when most normal people are on their way home to begin their weekend. Is it really fair to burden them with that question? So
Right.
I'll ask you. You want the answer to that question up at the beginning, or do you want it towards the end?
Well, the thing is we have to be pretty ignorant to think that the possibility is not out there. So let's go ahead and just get it out of the way. Are we doomed? Are we destined to have our habitat of the Earth be destroyed?
Or as we say back home, are we going to die, Tony?
That's actually a pretty easy answer. In one word, it's no. It's not something you need to lose sleep over. But if you allow a few more words around that, it's a very low probability, but also a very high consequence event. It's like that old fighter pilot saying about flying: 99% boredom, 1% stark terror. That's true. That's what we called it.
That's
Except
funny.
for large asteroids, it's more like 99.99 and on out, and a teeny tiny little bit of really stark terror. If an asteroid like the one in my book hit 2 miles across, the explosion would be like detonating the whole world's nuclear arsenal, except nearly 100 times larger.
Wow.
And that would have pretty bad consequences, of course. It would probably cause asteroid winter. You remember how we used to talk about nuclear winter,
Right.
a couple of decades ago? Well, this would be pretty similar to that, throwing a lot of debris into the air, forests and cities burning, smoke, and secondary fires caused by pieces of this thing flying to, mostly all around the world. And so there would probably be crop failures and probably 100 more times more deaths than from the direct blast.
Wow.
So hundreds of millions of people would probably die, including you and everyone you know, due to starvation and wars because of the collapse of civilization. So it's not likely to happen, but it's a dim possibility, and if we should find one that was on the way and had our name on it, then we would probably want to do something about it.
Well, I want to ask you this because it's possible that they can sneak up on us, because with the one in Russia just a few years ago, was that, I mean, we didn't know anything about an asteroid heading for us, and then we just hear about, oh, you know, there was an asteroid that streaked across the sky, but it was actually a lot of damage. Did we know about that, I mean, in advance, or they just didn't want to scare us? Or, I mean, what was that?
Well, no, that was exactly, you know, the thing that happens with a certain class of asteroids that basically have their orbit so that they're coming out of the sun to us, and that's exactly what happened with the Chelyabinsk Asteroid last year. It was February, I think. It came out of the sun, meaning it was on the daytime side of the Earth when it was approaching, and it couldn't be seen. And that's what the much bigger asteroid does too. It comes out of the sun.
Oh, okay.
There's an asteroid named Tutanus that's about the same size as the one in the story that did that same thing in 1989. Nobody saw it coming until it had already gone by and passed into the night sky. It wasn't particularly close, but the point is that if it had been on an impact course, we never would have known it. We would have been blindsided because we wouldn't have seen it when it was way further out in the solar system.
Well, one thing I have not had a chance to read this book, and I'm going to read this book, The Darkest Side of Saturn, Odyssey of the Reluctant Prophet of Doom. And first of all, how did you come up? I mean, the first part we understand, but the Odyssey of Reluctant Prophet of Doom. Where did you get that little portion?
Clever.
Yeah, you're very clever.
Well, it's about the two astronomers that discover this dangerous asteroid that might or might not hit, and they argue over how to announce it to the world. And he ends up going behind her back and making a big public announcement. That, incidentally, is when all hell breaks loose between them, because they're also headed for a possible illicit affair because they're married to other people. But unfortunately, the world yawns when it gets that news. So he has to go on an asteroid promotion campaign, a lot like I have to go on a book promotion campaign.
Right.
So it doesn't just happen. It doesn't just fall into your hip pocket. You have to do something about it. So in the process, that's how he becomes a reluctant prophet of doom. He didn't really want this role, but he also becomes an unwilling guru to people who crave spiritual guidance, and that puts him sideways with a fundamentalist preacher and his followers who stalk him and cause him a lot of grief. It also gets him involved with a radio talk show host, a controversial one, totally unlike yourself, I'm sure.
Well, Eddie, I don't know.
Hey.
Eddie, maybe Eddie too.
Okay.
But meanwhile, the asteroid just keeps on coming, and eventually all the players come together, and all hell breaks loose again. So that's sort of the gist of the story. Since everything takes place in an alternate universe,
Right.
I was able to have some fun with things like religion, science, and some trivial little things like the end of the universe and the meaning of life. And I also threw in a little ballet for high-class entertainment value.
Nothing wrong with that.
Asteroids, religion, sex, ballet, all those things would just naturally seem to go together. So
Were you drinking? No, I was kidding.
yeah, I should have been drinking.
Right.
It's a modest little novel. It only tackles, the trivial questions. And it was, partly satire and partly serious. I had some serious intent in it, but I also wanted to have a little fun, and I think I did.
Well, that's it is great, and it's great to always add a little humor, and especially if there's something that is very devastating to the human race. And I think this is definitely needs some humor in it.
Yeah, good entertainment. Anytime you throw humor and entertainment and that sort of thing in there, and you're coming from a good place, obviously, Tony, that engages them and then makes them more aware and more conscious of the actual message you're sharing with everybody, and I think that's amazing.
Well, it's got to be, any novel or any story has got to be entertaining. That's the first dictum for the author, I think. And if it's not entertaining, forget it. The book dies. But if you can keep people's attention, and then the book might have a chance.
Did you actually think about? Oh,
a little bit like giving birth to a child. You want to get it to stand on its own two legs eventually and walk around on its own, and you don't want to have to be hovering over it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, your publicist sent us a memo saying that you were thinking about calling your book 50 Shades of Asteroid.
I wish I'd thought of that.
That's funny, Eddie. Good
Very
one.
Nice.
So I have a weird
question. I wanted to get that book, but I just haven't gotten around to it
yet. This is an odd question. Let's say there's, at any given time, how many jets would you say were probably in the air in the continental United States?
Oh, geez, I'd have to guess, but I'd say at any given. I have looked at. There's a map of this on the internet, and I don't remember where it was, but it shows, the United States and an icon for all of the planes that are airborne at any one time. And if you fit the picture into your computer screen, what you see is basically the entire United States covered, wall to wall, coast to coast, north to south, with little airplanes, and you can't even see the ground because obviously the airplanes have to be drawn large enough to be seen, and so just from that picture alone, I would guess that there must be at least 10,000 airplanes airborne over the United States at any one time. But that's just totally wagged.
Well, and the reason I asked that question is, say there is an asteroid that's bigger than the one that came into Russia, but not as big as the great asteroid that's going to hit the 2 mile wide thing. How would that immediately affect the aircraft that are in the air at the time before it actually hit the Earth? What would happen if I was a passenger on one of those planes? I'm not going to be, because I predict that for myself. But
well, if it was the size of the Chelyabinsk, I always have to hesitate before I pronounce that word because it's so foreign. If it were the size of the Chelyabinsk asteroid, which is 20 meters, when that hit, going about 12 miles per second, roughly, it caused the equivalent of a 500 kiloton explosion in terms of nuclear tonnage, which is equivalent to about 25 times the size of the Hiroshima bomb. So if you had been in an airline that was anywhere, close to that, your world would be turned upside down, to put it mildly. The only thing that saved Chelyabinsk from a total disaster is that it exploded so high in the atmosphere. It was almost 30 kilometers up when it exploded, and a lot of that energy went into the atmosphere itself. In fact, the pressure wave that was created by that explosion went around the world more than once. It was monitored. It was detected by these pressure wave detectors that the UN uses to look for nuclear explosions. So it was an enormous thing, and that's only a 20-meter asteroid. As another example of a somewhat larger one, you've probably heard about the Tunguska asteroid that hit
early
Tunguska,
early
Russia
1900s? Yeah.
In 1908.
Yeah.
It's sort of funny how all these things hit over Russia, isn't it?
Right. Karma. No, just kidding.
But maybe that's just because Russia has got so much area that if something's going to come down randomly, the chances are it'll either land on Russia or in the ocean.
Yeah, that's prime real estate.
Well, I remember. Is it true because of it was the different angles? It came at a different angle, the 1908, than the one a year ago. Is that why it one exploded above the ground?
It was 100 meters. The Chelyabinsk.
Oh wow.
The Chelyabinsk actually came in at a pretty shallow angle, and that's another thing that probably caused the folk of Chelyabinsk to escape relatively unscathed. It came in. I think it was almost skimming the atmosphere. It was like
Yeah.
Between 10 and 20 degrees above the horizontal. And if it had been coming, straight down at that city, it would have been a lot worse. Now, I don't know what angle the Tunguska asteroid was coming in. It might have been, I think, most of the damage it did was to about 1,000 square miles of forest. It leveled almost 1,000 square miles of forest, and that might have been, it might have been either on a shallow angle exploding high in the atmosphere, or it might have even been coming directly down. But that asteroid, 100 meters, that's about 5 times larger than the Chelyabinsk asteroid, so that means there's 5 cube, or 125 times larger explosion. So you can see that anything 100 meters or more is going to quite possibly give us a problem, particularly if it's coming down over a populated area.
Right. I'm showing some pictures of it right now.
Most of the area of Earth is unpopulated.
Right. Yeah, I'm showing some pictures of it right now from the 1908 for our viewers and listeners. So, well, listeners can't, but your viewers can watch it. It was pretty devastating. I remember the gentleman, I can't remember his name, that actually went to one of the scientists that went to the area to research it. But yeah, they could never find the impact, or did they ever find the impact for that one?
Well, it wasn't an impact because it did explode in the atmosphere.
That's right.
Which probably argues that it was, on a shallow, angle like Chelyabinsk. If it had been coming, more or less vertically, it might have made it all the way through the atmosphere and hit the ground. But in any event, the explosion from that one was estimated to be between 10 and 15 megatons, which is getting up there. The sort of counterexample of the Chelyabinsk asteroid was the other one that came by just 2 weeks ago, Sunday. Oh yeah,
over New Zealand.
I'm sorry.
Didn't it go over New Zealand or something like that? Or?
Yeah, it went over New Zealand. It went by just above the altitude of the geosynchronous satellites, but it was coming not out of the sun, but from a direction opposite the sun. So it was in the night sky as it approached, and that's the reason it was found about 7 days before it actually went by. Wow. But you can imagine that if that one had been predicted to be on a collision course over some populated area, let's say somewhere over Europe or somewhere over the northeast United States, if there had been even if there had been 7 days of warning, that's way too little time to do anything in the way of deflecting it. About the best you could do would be to tell them to get people to evacuate, or tell them to go to their root shelters and sweat it out, because there's nothing else that could be done in that instance.
Well, and that said, though, even if we have enough time, we've seen all the movies, Bruce Willis
all
and
the bad ones.
The ones, but we've seen them, trying to land on it and trying to blow them up with nuclear bombs. If we do have enough time, we do notice, in 5 years, a big one heading our way. Is there anything we can do about it?
Well, you'd probably, if it was a big one on the order of the one I'm in my story, you'd need a lot of lead time, and probably 5 years is not enough, because it takes a few years just to build and launch a spacecraft, and a few more years to get there and do something. What you want to do is deflect it, and the way to do that is, one way to do that is to nudge it, and that old tried and true way in the movie that you mentioned is nuke it.
Right.
But you want to nuke it very carefully, because if you don't, some asteroids turn out to be rubble piles of rocks that are barely held together by weak gravity. So if you're not careful, you could turn what would have been a rifle shot into a shotgun blast and be worse off than before.
Wow.
So instead of trying to blow it apart, you would nuke it, but a little distance away so that it vaporizes some of the surface, and then that surface vapor, squirting away, and the reaction from that drives it in the opposite direction. You don't need to get it moving fast. You just need to get it moving a few millimeters per second. If you've got 10 to 15, I'd say probably 10 to 15 years minimum is what you would need.
Wow.
If you can get it moving just a few millimeters per second over that amount of time, then you can deflect it. If it's smaller, I was talking about, let's say, the 2-kilometer asteroid. If it was smaller, like something like the Tunguska asteroid, about 100 meters wide, then you might do with a little less warning time to send a mission with nuclear devices. You may need more than one spacecraft, each one of them delivering a bomb. Or we could do other things if we had more time, like hit it with a massive spacecraft going as fast as you could make it go to transfer momentum to it. And there's the movie tie-in. That would be like, well, as in the name at least, it would be like the Deep Impact spacecraft that
right.
we deliberately drove into a comet named Temple 1 in 2005.
Oh, we have done this?
Is that?
We have done this before?
We have done that before.
I did not know that.
But Temple 1, I think, I'm trying to remember how big Temple 1 is. I think it's several kilometers, something on the order of 5 to 10, but I may be wrong on that. Yeah, you probably need to hit it with more than just one to get it moving. For an asteroid that size, in fact, you probably would want to use the nuclear option on that one rather than punch it with a spacecraft because it's pretty large.
We might have to call on some of our little extraterrestrial friends
right.
out there to come and get us out of that bad spot. And if you're just tuning in,
maybe the aliens will save us.
Yeah, I got our fingers crossed. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to On Air with Tony Sweet, and we're doing our Truth Be Told show. And
this is a show about asteroids, and our wonderful guest Tony Taylor and his book,
The Darkest Side of Saturn: Odyssey of Reluctant Prophet of Doom. This is where Tony is exploring the conundrum raised by the discovery of a large asteroid that might hit us in 16 years. It's fascinating, by the way. Who's the person who gets to say and decide whether an asteroid is going to be a threat or not? And please don't say George W. Bush.
Well, up until the 1997 or so, there wasn't any one organization that was tagged with that. But I think it was 1998. There was a NASA program started called the Near Earth Object Program at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and in fact they were down the hall from me when I was there.
Wow.
And they collect data from astronomers all over the world and compute orbits and impact probabilities, and if they find one that's a possible risk, they first of all they compare their results with an independent organization in Italy, and if they both agree, this is something that you don't want to make a mistake on, a big oopsie. If they both agree, then they put it on a list that they call the Sentry list on their public website. That's Sentry spelled S-E-N-T-R-Y. And normally they have dozens of asteroids on that list, but the risks are mainly way out in the future, and they're very small. Almost all of the asteroids that are on the list at any one time eventually drop off of it because it just becomes apparent that they're not going to hit. But they're always adding new ones. So that's the organization that determines what the risk is. That's sort of the knowledge side of the equation, the muscle side of the equation. The power side of the equation is what do you do about it? If a bad threat were discovered, then there'd be a political decision about what to do about it. And right now there's no existing space defense system, so it would have to be an ad hoc effort to mount a spacecraft mission to do something about one that was discovered. So it all comes down to a political decision, and you would think that if we found an asteroid with our name on it, that would make all of the peoples of the world join hands and sing "Kumbaya" and
Right.
do something about it.
Yeah.
You would think.
Yeah,
I was
you would
gonna,
think.
yeah, I was going to ask how much politics comes into this, as it comes into everything, unfortunately. And but you answered the question before I could ask it, so thank you very much. And I was going to ask you too, with this and everything that you've been a part of in your entire career, what is the strangest thing or most unique thing you've ever seen or experienced in all of your adventures that led you up to this?
I think the thing that got my attention the most was when I discovered that there was a SAM missile tracking my airplane when I was flying near North Vietnam.
What?
Wow.
But other than that, when I was at the Jet Propulsion Lab, I think that you described it already when you were doing my intro. When I saw those first pictures coming in from Saturn, from the Voyager spacecraft, it was looking back on Saturn, and that's when the title popped into my mind, and that was just almost an overwhelming experience. You know, in all of human history, Saturn had been nothing more than a dot as seen from Earth on the celestial sphere, or at the most a disk with a ring around it. But it looked two-dimensional. But when you were looking at it from the spacecraft on the other side of Saturn and above it somewhat, you got the whole thing. You got the bright side, sort of a crescent wrapped around the dark side, and then you had a shadow coming off of the planet and cutting across the rings, and all of a sudden it just became a very three-dimensional and real object. And I think that's what inspired my title. It made an impression on me. And by the way, on the back of the book, I think I found the image. I put it on the back of the book of that very picture of Saturn that I saw coming in.
Now, this will sound odd. Did you now what you just described in a different capacity is a spiritual experience? And I'm not saying religious, I'm saying spiritual from the inside out. And when you were witnessing that, when you were literally in the presence of that experience and having it, was there ever a small sense of deja vu, or this is unequivocally my life purpose, or anything like that that just sort of exploded inside of you?
Not on that one. I think you're talking. I think you're sort of skirting around the edges. You're talking about an epiphany.
Yes.
Which is probably not too far from a grand mal seizure. But I think I've skirted that a couple of times in my life. I've had a couple of moments when, just twice, and I can remember them both, when I sort of became one with the universe, and it lasted a fleeting amount of time, maybe 10 seconds or 15 seconds at the most, and then all of a sudden things just sort of faded away, the understanding faded away, and normal became normal again. But yeah, I've had a couple of those experiences, and I think those are pretty much equivalent to religious experiences that people have when they move like that.
Well, before we get you out of here, because I know you're a busy man, you have a lot of interviews to do. But here's what I have a question. One thing you've got to do is live a life of many children's dreams. At least when I was a kid, of being part of NASA. And but what is a NASA spacecraft navigator? What is that, and what was your job doing? Because that sounds fascinating.
Yeah, well, basically, it was our function on the projects. We were on each project. There's a navigation team and a mission planning team and a spacecraft hardware team and so forth. Just several different teams of people, making the spacecraft go. But our function basically was to answer the question, where are we and where are we going? Where is the spacecraft and where is it going to go by Neptune, for instance? And to answer the first part of the question, where are we, is we basically track it from 3 networks around the world, one in Goldstone, which you already know about, and another one near Canberra, and another one near Madrid, Spain. These are all NASA-operated facilities, and we get the data from that, and we figure out where the spacecraft is, and from that, and the speed and velocity rather, and we can figure out where it's going. And then the next part of the problem is to apply that knowledge to make the spacecraft do a maneuver, not a big maneuver usually, something on the order of meters per second, to make it go where it's supposed to go. So that's sort of the whole thing in a nutshell.
Well, no, like I said, it's very fascinating, and like I said, growing up, everybody's like, I want to be an astronaut, I want to work for NASA, and so this was definitely someone's dream, and I'm sure it had to be your dream just to be able to be a part of it. And my one last question that I have is there things that you've seen or things that you I know that maybe you can't because of your security clearance that you couldn't share with not necessarily of what our future is with the technology, but that maybe you've seen that you couldn't share with us? Maybe it's just a yes or no question.
I think you're asking me a question that might, if I were to answer it, might put you in some physical danger. So,
that's okay. Go ahead for it.
Oh my God!
I know, right? I have my mom and dad after me anyway, so that's okay.
Yeah.
No. There's nothing that I've seen. I think I know where your question is coming from, and although I believe it's almost impossible that there would not be other life in the universe, given the number of probable Earth-like planets.
Right.
And the galaxy and the universe. I don't think that they've been coming here in the form of UFOs, for instance, over the decades. I think most of the UFOs are exactly what that name says: unidentified objects that most likely are can be explained ordinarily. But that's a hard one to convince everybody of.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and again, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to On Air with Tony Sweet, and we're doing our Truth Be Told segment. We're talking to Tony Taylor. The name of his book is The Darkest Side of Saturn, Odyssey of a Reluctant Prophet of Doom, and it's also available on Amazon. You can get this at Barnes & Nobles and Goodreads. At Goodreads, it's goodreads.com/Tony Taylor. He's on Facebook at facebook.com/darkest side of Saturn. And on Twitter, it's twitter.com/Tony_Taylor_nav, NAV. So check it out. It sounds fascinating, Tony.
And we thank you so much for being here. We really had a great time.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, and come back again on your next book, all right?
And tell Jan
okay,
we said
yeah,
hey.
That one will be named The Darkest Side of Pluto.
Yay! All right. Well, thank you, Tony. We appreciate it.
Have a great day.
We'll keep in touch.
Thanks.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, so don't go anywhere. Eddie and I have Deidre, Jordan Harris, and Kimberly Esmond with us, so we're going to go for a little break. When we come back, we're going to talk about what if an asteroid was heading towards us. What 5 things would we do, change, or even just accomplish before that happens? So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with On Air with Tony Sweet. Here we go.